Vamos para mais um vídeo que vocês mandaram. O Alex Zuck quer matar nós, cara. Ele mandou 2 receitas do filme do menu. E por que tá com o botãozinho de... Aí, pronto. Tá com o botão de tradução aqui. E porque a gente acabou de ver o filme e o menu e tem gente fazendo prato do menu na internet, porque obviamente é pra matar nós de fome, né? Obviamente. Então assim, fique avisado. Vocês vão tudo passar fome. Vamos lá. Hum,
Wow.
uau, que bosta.
Wow.
Uau,
It's actually quite
uau.
bad.
Dá pra
Hey,
fazer
what's
isso
up,
que é o
guys?
melhor.
Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look
Dá
at
pra fazer
Tyler's
isso bem?
bullshit from the menu. One of the more harrowing foodie film experiences that prods us in our collective imposter syndrome and lets us vicariously experience our worst nightmare, getting up on stage and having no idea what you're doing. So first up, the protein in question, lamb, which is Frenched and cut into double chops. Now, I don't want to waste too much lamb on the screen-accurate version, so I'm only going to do 3 ribs. To French these, we want to place a cut across the point where we want the bones to end, then continue cutting between the bones and the skin to remove. Then we're going to cut the thin strips of meat and sinew from between the bones, right down to the point of the initial cut, and try to remove as much of the lamb from the now exposed bones as possible before beginning to scrape the bones with your knife to remove the thin final membrane. Once the bones are uniform color and squeaky clean, you got yourself a Frenched rack of ribs, from which I'm going to remove the skin and excess fat from the top and separate into individual chops. I know that Tyler's were double chops, but I don't ultimately think that's going to make a big difference. Next up, the leek, which was simply sliced. Tyler used the entire unwashed leek, but because leeks' interiors are so dirty, I'm going to stop there for the sake of sheer edibility. Next up, the shallots, which were haphazardly chopped, some with the skin still on. And lastly, a big hunk of butter dropped into too hot a pan. Once that's good and melted and maybe slightly burned, I'm going to start by adding my double aromatic combo of shallots and leeks, allowing these to cook for an indeterminate period of time until they're, I don't know, softened or something. Then, in amongst the vegetables, we're going to add the lamb, making an attempt to nestle it down between the other stuff so that it can boil in butter and at least gesturally be cooked. After about 3 to 5 minutes, just enough time so that the lamb picks up some nice gray color and it's definitely not cooked through, we're heading straight to plating. No seasoning nor garnish is necessary. Arrange the chops over top, and there you have it, Tyler's bullshit, which, while it has its shortcomings, is on the table in less than 20 minutes. But how's it taste? I'm going to make myself a bite here of the very rare lamb and the partially cooked leek, and I can tell you that Chef Slovic's critiques were really spot on. It's really quite bad. Raw lamb, runny butter, and dirty vegetables. So can we make something salvageable out of these star ingredients? I'm going to start by filling an ice cube tray with olive oil in a seemingly random pattern and throwing those in the freezer to solidify for at least a few hours. While that's happening, we can take the very necessary step of cleaning our leeks. After cutting off the roots on the bottom, trimming them to a uniform length, and slicing them in half lengthwise, we're going to rinse them thoroughly in a big old bowl of water. As you can see, there's a huge amount of yuck that we don't want to end up in our yum. Now, once we've patted the leeks dry, we're going to place them in a vac-sealed bag. Then we're going to fill the spaces in between the leeks with a sliced preserved lemon, which has a much more mellow flavor than its fresh counterpart, 2 large cloves of crushed garlic, and our olive oil ice cubes, which we froze so we could more easily vac-seal the bag without all the liquid getting sucked out. And since it wouldn't be a chefy dish without some sous vide, that's where these guys are headed, a 185-degree Fahrenheit water bath for 40 minutes, during which time we can prep our lamb, which I'm going to roast and crust. I want to keep the predominant color of the dish green, so I'm pulsing 2 cups of pistachios in a food processor until they're coarsely ground, and tossing them with a half cup of panko breadcrumbs. The roast itself is getting the same Frenched ribs treatment, and before crusting, it's going to get lightly seasoned with kosher salt, rubbed down with a little bit of vegetable oil, and seared in a ripping hot cast iron skillet. Just enough on each side to introduce a little color, Maillard reaction, and by extension flavor to its exterior, so blast it as quickly and as hotly as you possibly can. Then once it's cooled off for about 10 minutes, we're going to brush down the meat evenly with a mixture of 2 parts white miso to 1 part Dijon mustard. This is going to act as a delicious glue with which to adhere our pistachio breadcrumb mixture. Then this guy's getting placed on a rack set in a rim baking sheet, temperature probed at its thickest point, and roasted at 400 degrees Fahrenheit until it registers 125. Now to cover the shallot's presence, we're finely mincing a shallot, crushing up 1 clove of black garlic, and finely mincing 2 tablespoons of tarragon in preparation to make a black garlic béarnaise. Then our olive oil poached leeks are coming out of the hot tub, getting removed from the bag and patted dry of excess oil with a paper towel, because we're going to lightly grill these leeks to finish them. But true to form, we have to go way over the top, so I thought we'd utilize some binchotan, the fussy, long-burning, and odorless Japanese charcoal. So we're going to let our leeks sizzle over top that, cut side down, while we make our béarnaise. Into a small pot goes our single finely minced shallot, half of our chopped fresh tarragon, and 1/4 cup of white wine vinegar. We're bringing this to a gentle simmer and cooking until barely a tablespoon of syrupy liquid remains. Set that aside to cool completely before placing it into a large heat-proof bowl, along with 2 large egg yolks that we're going to whisk together into a smooth mixture before bringing it back over to the stovetop where we have a pan of shallow simmering water at the ready. Turn it all the way down, place the bowl over top, and whisk constantly for 5 to 7 minutes until the mixture is thickened and nearly
cara,
doubles the
cozinhar
volume.
bagulho
Then, both
muito
to make it
louco, velho.
béarnaise
Tipo,
and to incorporate the
você
final
tem que
missing
curtir
ingredient
muito.
from Tyler's dish, we're starting to
Gastar
stream in 12
todo esse
tablespoons
tempo
of
pra
melted
fazer
butter,
tudo isso,
one
mas
little
tem
splash
gente
at
que
a
gosta e
time,
realmente
whisking
no final fica
thoroughly
bom.
between each addition to make sure that it's fully incorporated and so that the sauce doesn't break. Once all the butter's added, kill the heat, season with salt, and
Nossa
whisk in our
senhora.
crushed clove of black garlic. Now there's a butter and shallot sauce I can get behind. Once the leeks are nearly done and the lamb has rested for 10 minutes, it's time to carve, plate, and serve. First, let's see if our lamb is a pleasant medium rare. Before carving, as desired, I'm going with 2
Nossa.
double chops. To plate, we're going to plop down a generous gob of our black garlic béarnaise, and it just wouldn't be a tasting menu without one of these chefy smears. Then I'm trimming the rough ends off the leeks and pulling out everything but the outer 2 most layers, which are tough and stringy, placing them on the plate, of course, with tweezers. Arrange the lamb over top in a haphazard yet intentional way, and of course we got to utilize some microgreens, this time by virtue of some smaller tweezers. I'm going to sort of dot those around the varying culinary topography. Then I think this dish is going to need a little bit of acid and a little bit of heat. Luckily, Alvin left some pickled bird's eye chili in the fridge, which I think is going to add just the right amount of bite to cut through all the richness. And there you have it, the hopefully edible version of Tyler's bullshit. Leeks, lamb, shallots, and butter all proudly on display. But how's it taste? And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but it's really very good. The black garlic béarnaise is a perfect pairing with the lamb. The olive oil poached leeks are tender and flavorful. The microgreens, as always, do virtually nothing. And the brightness of the pickled chilies provide a flavorful contrast. Would Chef Slovik like it? Probably not. I'm guessing he'd find all kinds of things wrong with it. But he is a miserable psychopath, and I'm over here eating lamb like it's lollipops.
Eu tô aqui pra comer o bagulho. Ah, ok, parece muito bom. Parece muito bom. Nossa. É aquele negócio. Eu não tenho saco, nem conhecimento e nem ferramenta pra preparar tudo isso. E eu não tenho nem dinheiro pra comprar um bagulho desse. Pronto. Então, a gente fica só observando mesmo, tá tudo certo. E agora a gente vai para o hamburgão.
This episode is sponsored by Cash.
Pera aí, deixa eu trocar aqui também, porque... Colocar o nome certo, né, poxa. Aqui. Aí.
App. When your personal finances connect you to your funds and the things that matter, that's money, and that's Cash App. You know what else is money? Bigger, better burger balls, meltier cheese through science, and getting to eat potato rolls is part of your job. That's money, and that's Cash App. Download Cash App from the App Store or Google Play Store to add your cash tag to the...
Cheese is the best cheese for a cheeseburger because I like it.
Medium. American cheese.
American cheese is the best cheese for a cheeseburger
Eu que
because
faço,
it melts
eu que
without
faço os
splitting.
almoços
How
aqui em
much will that
casa.
set me back?
$9.95.
That come with fries?
Niels,
Yes, chef.
is the fryer still on?
Yes, chef.
Mas é aquele
Crinkle
negócio, cara.
cut
Eu sei
for
o
Julian.
quanto
Hey,
demora
what's
pra
up, guys?
cozinhar.
Welcome back to
Por isso que eu falo,
Binging with
putz,
Babish. For this
tem
week,
dia
we're
que você não
taking a
quer
look at
gastar
that
2 horas na
amazing
cozinha,
looking
cara.
burger from the menu, which at an MSRP of $10 and promising to elicit the burger memories from childhood, I like to imagine goes a little something like this. First, some very thinly sliced onions that appeared to be sliced pole to pole, just showing off how not of a professional chef I am. Frozen crinkled cut fries cooked in 375°F worth of peanut oil, about 3 to 5 minutes until deeply golden brown and crisp, tossed of course with kosher salt while still nice and warm. Burger balls of 4 ounces size, just enough so that they'll be thick enough that we can potentially cook them to medium. A hearty sesame-seeded burger bun, split and toasted in just a little bit of oil on a cast iron skillet, removed and replaced with 2 4-ounce balls of high-quality 80/20 ground beef. Then not so much smashed as smeared, almost as though you're pressing down on a bit of beefy masonry, helping prevent any stickage from occurring to the spatula. Seasoned generously on one side with kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper, then chef prepares his is Burger's Oklahoma style. That is, with our thinly sliced onions lightly pressed into the burger meat before flipping, effectively spot welding griddled onions into the bottom of the patty. As soon as they're flipped, both patties are topped with 2 slices of yellow American cheese. These are left to simply melt while the patties finish cooking, then one patty is premeditatively placed upon the other, and both are transported to the awaiting toasty bun and mountain of Frenched fries. So there you have it, an amazing classic double cheeseburger with fries, probably overpriced at $9.99, but still capable of eliciting memories of all the great burgers you've had in your life. Now, I doubt that they had Kraft singles and sesame potato buns getting shipped out to the private island restaurant. So what would it take to make this burger gourmet and from scratch without engaging in, as Margot puts it, fancy
Vamos piorar, vai.
Let's start by making our own big, beautiful potato buns. Into the bowl of a stand mixer goes 415 grams of bread flour, 75 grams of potato flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and a tablespoon each instant yeast and kosher salt. Tiny whisk together before adding 170 grams of water, 110 grams of whole milk, and 2 eggs at room temperature. Cook it up, shut it down, and commence to kneading until things just come together into a shaggy ball, anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. Then, to give our buns a luxuriant brioche-like texture, we're going to start adding 50 grams of unsalted room temperature butter, 1 tiny cube at a time.
Sim, o cara tá fazendo pão.
Each cube has disappeared completely into the dough before adding the next.
Gente, ele pega a aposta, dobra a aposta, olha pra aposta de novo, dobra de novo.
Because my dough is very sticky and slack, but especially with brioche, I've seen very wet doughs come together and become handleable. So if things look a little too wet early on, just keep working it until it easily passes.
O 3 do mês, o consumidor do Mercado Livre tem vantagens imperdíveis pra você. Papum!
Tomar no cu, cara. Ah, não, vai tomar no cu. Ah, não, aí você tá de sacanagem comigo,
This
cara.
episode is sponsored because my dough is very sticky and slack. But it's sticky, it's the game that it is. Early on, just keep working it until it easily passes the window pane test. But
Caraca, mano, tomou jump scare aqui,
sticky, it's not too late to add a little bit more potato flour. It is, after all, easier
Não, o cara
to
vai
add
fazer
dry
o
late
próprio
in the game than
queijo,
it
fica
is to
vendo.
add wet. So just keep dusting with more potato flour
Ele
until
vai
the
matar
dough
a
is
vaca,
workable and
fica
bouncy
vendo.
and supple. Place in a generously oiled bowl and cover with plastic wrap to bulk ferment at room temperature for about an hour and a half, unless you suddenly remember that you have a dough proofer. And since we're pretending that we're working in a restaurant, we can use that. And thus, in a little less than an hour, my dough has doubled in size. So now I'm going to retrieve it from the bowl, weigh it, and divide it into 5 equal pieces. In this case, about 190 grams each. Once divided, we're going to roll them into tight, taut little balls.
Pão caseiro é bom, cara, tipo, tudo isso é muito da hora, cara, mas assim, você precisa de senhor tempo pra fazer tudo isso, sabe? Cozinhar demora. Cozinhar demora.
This tray doesn't fit in my proving drawer, I'm inflating it with air from my nice warm lungs, which should help them rise over the next hour, during which time they should nearly double in size. Now, to test our proof, we want to poke the dough. If it springs back too completely or too quickly, we want to cover and let proof for another 15-20 minutes, until our poke leaves an indent that doesn't really puff all the way back out. Next, we gotta prolifically brush these guys down.
Eu cozinho, cara, por sobrevivência. Eu cozinho porque tem que almoçar. Tem que jantar. Eu não cozinho pra fazer isso, não. Nossa, olha isso, cara.
Buns, and then these guys are headed into a preheated 375-degree Fahrenheit oven for anywhere from 18 to 22
não, cara,
minutes,
tipo, não
until
é
they
só
emerge
ter tempo, né? Ter dinheiro também,
I mean,
né?
we're trying to go for an over-the-top burger here, but I think that these are a bridge too far. So let's try again with the dough divided into 6 pieces for a much more reasonable, but still pretty gigantic bun that we're going to let cool completely on the tray. Next up, the matter of American cheese, which, as was mentioned, is the perfect cheese for a burger because it can melt without splitting. But using this technique from modernist cuisine, you can make American cheese out of any kind of cheese you want, like this stuff, a mixture of sharp cheddars, Gouda, Colby, and Monterey Jack. But you can pick 32 ounces of relatively young shredded cheese
O cara ia fazer o próprio queijo, mano.
Stovetop in a large, wide saucepan. We're going to bring 12 ounces of whole milk to a simmer. Notice that the tripod is off kilter, give that a tip, and then into the milk we're going to whisk 1.5 ounces of sodium citrate, a simple food additive used in molecular gastronomy that I figured they probably have on hand. Once that's up to a bare simmer, we're going to add all the cheeses at once, reduce the heat as low as it'll go, and use an immersion blender to blend the cheese and the milk together into a devastatingly creamy, smooth cheese product. Now this stuff sets up almost immediately, so make sure you have a loaf pan lined with plastic wrap ready to go. Pour all the cheese stuff in there and then tap it against the tabletop with great vigor in a hapless attempt to remove any errant bubbles. Cover this and refrigerate for at least 4 hours or until completely set. And there you have it, one big old loaf of American cheese style product. Next up, the fries, which were prepared crinkle cut. In anticipation of this, I ordered a crinkle cutter, which to my disappointment wasn't even remotely sharp, as though it were designed for already cooked food or Play-Doh or something. As a result, these 6 potatoes would take 45 45 minutes for me to hand carve into crinkle cut fries. Not much of a lesson to be learned here, apart from don't buy a crinkle cutter that you can rip in half with your bare hands. Now the potatoes that we're using today are russet potatoes, very high in starch, so they will begin to almost immediately oxidize and discolor, which is why we're immediately plunging them into a pot of cold water, then rinsing them 3 more times to remove any excess starch. Then finally we're covering them once again with cold water and adding 1 tablespoon each kosher salt and white vinegar. This is both going to season the potatoes and help them retain their shape during their absurdly long 20 to 30 minute cook time. We want them almost falling apart in this method, appropriately adapted from Heston Blumenthal. I'm very carefully retrieving the fries and placing them on a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet where they can cool. The steam that you're seeing, just like all steam, is moisture. The less excess moisture in potatoes, the lighter and fluffier the interior of our fries are going to end up. Once cooled completely, these guys are headed into the freezer for at least 4 hours or until frozen solid. Then they're getting their second of 3 cooks of low-temperature fried 275-degree Fahrenheit peanut oil, almost like a potato confit. At first, they're going to sit kind of eerily silently on the bottom of the pot, but before long, they'll start fizzing and floating and all the stuff that you expect fries to do. Once they just barely start getting a little bit of color on them, we're going to fish them out and let them drain on a paper towel-lined baking sheet. Then I'm carefully arranging them back on the rack, making sure nobody's overlapping, everybody's slipping head to toe, and back into the freezer they go for at least 4 hours or up to a few months if you want to make these ahead of time. Strain all the particulate out of your oil, and when it's time for the final fry, these guys are now headed into 375-degree Fahrenheit oil for 3 to 5 minutes until deeply golden brown and crisp. Fish them out, drain them on paper towels, and toss them with kosher salt while they're still nice and hot. And there you have it, our meticulously handcrafted crinkle cuts versus store-bought. Not a super fair comparison to make. The store-bought ones are as good as you can expect, better out of the fryer than out of the oven, but these triple cook guys are in a league of their own. The fried exterior is super thick and craggy, and the interior is creamy and tender. Even after all the time and care and hand crinkle cutting, if you ask me, worth it.
Gira, gira, gira.
Gira na puta que pariu!
This episode is sponsored by Cash App.
Gira, gira o demônio, rapaz.
Our ones are the first time, some pretty nice meat and crinkle cutting, if you ask me, worth it. Last up, the meat. And I figured they're working with some pretty nice meat at Hawthorne, so I've got my favorite cuts here. Short rib for fat, brisket for flavor, and chuck roast for chuck. I'm discarding any sinew or connective tissue and cutting all the meat and fat into 1-inch cubes. Letting these guys hang out in the freezer for about 20 minutes before being passed through the medium plate of a thoroughly chilled meat grinder for a lovely, pebbly, fatty, extraordinarily flavorful burger blend. Now, something interesting to me was that this was a smash burger being cooked to medium doneness, so I'm opting for behemoth 6-ounce balls, which I'm hoping is going to give us enough width to fill our buns and enough height to maintain a little pink. This feels about as appropriate a time as any to bust out the flat top, oil it up, toast our buns, preheat to smoking, and commence to smashing. From this point on, it's the same procedure as before, but I ran into a wrinkle. Everything was going grand until the time came to apply the American cheese. When retrieving it from the fridge, I noticed that it was quite soft. It tasted great and looked like it was going to melt well, but would it pass through my slicer? And the answer is sort of, in very smeary, soft, thick slices, which on the day of the shoot I thought looked fine, but now that I'm sitting down to edit it, I'm noticing it looks pretty scraggly. So I'll be right back. I'm going to run downstairs and make a half batch of the cheese base, for which I'm going to try a different method to imitate deli slices. For starters, I've got a pizza steel that's been sitting in a 275
ele pega a aposta, dobra a aposta, olha a aposta, pô, não tá dobrado o suficiente, vamos dobrar de novo? Bora!
Surface upon which I can spread the cheese as thinly as possible before it sets. This ended up working like a charm, which is good news because I'm filming this less than 24 hours before you're watching it. Once you got a nice thin sheet of cheese, I'm going to throw this in the fridge for a few minutes until it's solidified, invert it onto a more cut-friendly surface like parchment paper, break off the edges first, and then peel away the
pessoa
baking
mais
mat, revealing our sheet
megalomaníaca
of American cheese. Break it down into slices, and then it's ready for much more photogenic burger melting. Now that we all agree that I've redeemed myself, I can eat this and go back upstairs and pick up where I left off. At which point I'll realize that the original burger didn't really look that bad to begin with, and maybe I didn't need to do all that. Quick before this gets too meta, let's cut to a slow-motion burger squish. Chef's table text, nice. Eat your heart out, David Gelb. Anyway, so yeah, this turned out awesome. Just one of the cheesiest and burgeriest experiences imaginable. In fact, let's go back to the chef's table cam, add the text. Yeah, that does it justice. And while this burger cost a few more bucks to make, what it really cost was time. So I guess that poses the ultimate question about fine dining or whatever. Thanks again to Cash App. That's money, that's Cash App. Download Cash App.
Você tá feliz, Alexiuk? Você tá feliz, assim, de deixar todo mundo triste? Todo mundo com fome? Todo mundo conhecendo o megalomaníaco da cozinha? Não, e o cara, assim, ele tem um time tão bom de fazer as coisas que ele não te dá tempo de respirar. Você não consegue reclamar. Você vai reclamar de uma coisa, ele já começa a fazer outra coisa. Fala, nossa, e o queijo foi pra carne. Mas a maldita carne... Tem o pão. Mas o pão e a batata... Eu sou uma piada pra você? É sério? Você está feliz de maltratar a gente assim? Eu conhecer ele? Não, não quero mais conhecer ele. Não quero mais conhecer. A pessoa que maltrata a gente. E agora eu tô como? Agora eu tô com fome, com vontade de comer lanche, e eu não tenho dinheiro pra isso. Obrigado. Valeu. Não, obrigado. Você acabou com o dia. Tipo, ó, já tá mais ou menos na hora do café. Eu não tomo café da tarde porque não dá tempo, né? Eu só janto depois. Eu vou ficar mais algumas horas com fome de lanche. Esse é o pior de tudo, né? E é isso. Eu espero que você esteja feliz com isso, cara. Eu espero, de verdade. De verdade. Eu tô triste. Tô chateado. Tô deprimido. Tô depressivo. E é isso. Esse foi 2 pratos. E eu aprovei. Provavelmente ele fez todos os pratos do filme do menu. Provavelmente. Não sei, quem sabe. Quer dizer, todos não, né? Tem um que não dá pra fazer. Quer dizer, você consegue fazer, mas não replicar. Mas enfim. É isso aí. Um bom anime. Até o próximo vídeo. Eu tô